And please bear with me. This is my first time hosting the technical aspect of the meeting, which you all can probably tell. Okay, tonight's meeting proceedings will follow typical BCDC Design Subcommittee meeting format, beginning with a brief presentation from the proponent, followed by comments from BCDC commissioners, followed by public testimony. A reminder to proponents that to proponent teams that presentations will be limited to 10 minutes. BPDA staff will give presenters a halftime and a 2-minute warning. With that, unless we have any questions or comments from the commissioners, we're ready to invite the first proponent team to present. Okay, so the first project is 232 A Street in the South Boston waterfront. A presentation of the proposed project at 232A will be given by representatives of the proponent team, which I believe are Lauren, Ian, and Charlie. Please let me know if I've missed anybody and should elevate anybody else. This will be the second presentation of the proposed project to the design subcommittee. Commissioners Love, Gilly Smith, Haseen, Kotaridis, and Sykes were present at the most recent BCDC design subcommittee and referred the proposed project for additional review. These commissioners should be present to, these commissioners should be prepared to deliver remarks at the start of deliberation. It is my understanding that Commissioner Kim has been recused from review, and confirming that I have not missed any others in the commissioners who are present. And to mention that the commissioners present indeed are Commissioners Love, Gilly Smith, and Haseen, and we may be joined by Commissioner Sykes. And unless we have any questions, we'll move to proponent presentation. So Lauren, Ian, or Charlie, do you have your presentation ready to share?
Yeah, me. Can you share your screen?
No, I need to elevate me.
You might have to. Yeah, sorry. Yes, me. Yes, please.
Can we go to full screen somehow? Okay, great.
You've got the wrong screen there. Yeah, there you go.
There we go. Very nice. Thank you.
Thanks, me. And thanks everyone for your time tonight. We're here to respond to the handful of open items from the last subcommittee on January 16th. Can flip to the next slide, which are continue to demonstrate how the building is contextualized with the overall neighborhood, improve the link between the two parcels, the park and the building, illustrate the quality of street life on Binford, showing its use as a public street, and further illustrate refinements and craftsmanship of the glass on the west or channel facing facade. Since the last subcommittee, we've also had 3 working sessions with BPDA urban design staff to address these items and more. And we're very appreciative of both BCDC and BPDA's thoughtful comments that have brought the project to where it is today. To carry forward some of the context typically shared at full committee, here is a high-level overview of the zoning as it relates to the 100 acres master plan PDA. We are within the prescribed height, use, and massing, about 30% less dense, 1 building versus 2, which enables a waterfront park that's roughly 3 times the size of what was prescribed in the PDA and 5 times the size of Binford Street as park as it exists today. With that, I'll pass it to Charlie.
Yeah, and so we're going to talk really quickly today, and we can always come back to these slides during discussion, depending on where you want to go. But some of the questions you asked in our last BCDC presentation were to talk about how the building is contextualized into the neighborhood. Next slide. And so here you see a photograph of the site from the post office side of the channel, it's a little bit hard to get to the exact right vantage point to shoot our parcel, but it's to the right of 15 Necco Street, as you see here. And then when you go to the next slide, we've simulated this in a wide angle rendering that shows now 15 Necco Street, a little bit further to the left, the related Beale 244, 284 A Street projects fully built out. And then our building to the right of that, starting to be at a smaller scale, set further back away from the channel because of the park. Next slide. And if we go a little bit further to the southwest, now you see our building on the oblique. And the real key thing that we want to convey is this idea of the building of two personalities. We talked about this a little bit last time, this sort of more masonry-like kind of structure towards the Fort Point neighborhood, and a more glassy but neutral facade facing the park that ties into some of the newer construction, but also has more of a kind of a city scale to it. Next slide. When we talk about the materiality of our building, we really want to celebrate the kind of color and texture of the neighborhood, the brick masonry of the historic loft buildings, but we're not necessarily mimicking that entirely. And so here we're looking at maybe a larger scale material, perhaps a terracotta that forms the crux of the building fabric as it relates to the neighborhood. But it's supported most importantly by this chassis structure that you see here embedded in this truss, born from the need to span over top of the I-90 extension tunnel, but at the same time relating to some of the structures that span over the Fort Point Channel today, these bridges with the Warren trusses, and also the steel piano rusticas that you see in some of the loft buildings, these kind of cast iron facades that are oftentimes painted in that darker gray color. Next slide. And so that leads to the genetics of the kind of the way that we assemble our building. And it starts again from this chassis structure spanning over the I-90 tunnel structure that you see at the bottom of the page here. That leads to the rather unique geometry of our ground floor. It's all actually starting from the I-90 channel or I-90 tunnel, but we think it's actually turned into this really wonderful way of our building kind of softening itself as it comes to the ground, but then allowing for a more regularized footprint up in the air. Next slide. And so when you look at the neighborhood and the way that our building ties into it, we think that this materiality is going to be very important. But when you look at it from the city side, our building is much more recessive. So for example, in the middle rendering you see here at the top, the building's not even visible from the Summer Street Bridge. We had talked about that a little bit, that it's actually completely hidden by the related Beale construction. But we do believe that when you look at the image to the upper right-hand corner, that it knits itself into the fabric and becomes a transitional building between these two worlds of the really larger scale Seaport District and related Beale and 15 Necco Street development that's coming to this area. Next slide. And so part of what you've asked us to do then is also talk about how we could link the landscape together of the two parcels so that the park and our 232A Street site aren't separated by Necco Street. And Ian will talk to that.
Okay, great. Next slide. So this shows the overall plan presented at the last BCD subcommittee. For context, the waterfront park on the left, building on the right with the Necco Street extension running north-south in the middle of the page. And as we go to the next slide, this really reflects the updated open space plan in response to the comments. We do want to acknowledge the importance of the park as for the public and not an accessory or extension of the building itself. But we did agree with bringing some consistency to the design language across from Necco Street. And if we go to the next slide, this outlined some of the key adjustments we've made to maintain some of that cohesive design approach. So really extending the park to the curb line, prioritizing the park on the western edge of Necco, extending that overall material palette and geometric language across Necco to create that overall consistency. We have added an additional tree and adjusted the tree spacing to extend those landscape zones across from Necco. And what we liked about this is the adjustment also opened up the visual access to the northwest lobby and reinforcing the kitty corner across from the G5 parcel. We also, in looking at the developments further to the north, we've really tried to highlight and enhance those pedestrian connections on the north and south edges. And really, we like the idea that as Necco gets extended further to the south, we kind of are bookended at the Binford crossing and the arcade with these enhanced crossings across from Necco.
And Ian, just to let you know, you're a little over halfway.
Okay, great. And then as we go to the next slide, we did want to include a diagram highlighting the key waterfront connections, you know, the importance of both the connections of the arcade, our site being on the left side of this image, the arcade and Binford Street, but the importance that this is part of a larger narrative and a larger network of connectivity from the neighborhood towards the waterfront. And with that, I'll hand it back to Charlie.
And so part of what you've asked us to talk about is, even though Binford Street isn't the only way of kind of connecting to the waterfront, it is an important one. And so you asked us to study that. Next slide. And so starting right at the corner of A Street and Binford, here you see our building with a strong datum that kind of reflects the human scale retail opportunities that are available in our spaces for public accommodation, with the intent of creating Binford Street as an enticing, open pedestrian environment. And we think that that's really very possible, very much in keeping with this design. All in keeping as well with the idea that we talked about last time about, yes, this is the place where we are going to have some vehicular access into our building, but that we can work around that, design this streetscape to be a pleasant environment. Next slide. And in particular, one of the things that's really nice about this design, we think, is because of that irregular shape I mentioned a few seconds ago at the ground floor plane, our building is actually able to open up as you go down Binford Street and really open up that vista to this park and to the city skyline beyond, as well as providing access for things like our bike parking that you see here to the left and the main entrance to the lobby. Next slide. But when we look at Binford Street in elevation, we think there's a great opportunity as well for potentially for public art. We think that this facade system that we have here is going to have some areas of opacity. They don't need to be very long, but we think maybe an opportunity for some tactile quality, hand-laid brick, you know, showing that this building is assembled by people, not a machine, we think is going to be a really nice way of providing a bit of warmth to the city's streetscape here. Next slide. And you also asked us to look carefully at the west elevation, because you were not entirely convinced, I think, in our last presentation about just how flat, how neutral that facade should be. And in our discussions with the BPDA, we further continued that. Next slide. But the underlying concept, our design idea for this building, is that it's really about the park and this foil, our west facade as a foil for the park, a backdrop, not something that's drawing attention, but something that's maybe more reflective of the park. Next slide. And so these are the renderings that we talked about last time, and you saw that it was really talking about this carefully manipulated greenscape that Ian and his team have been designing, and that the facade was trying to be fairly quiet. But I think, David, you might have asked us a little bit about, you know, are there ways of introducing a little bit of texture to that facade? And the BPDA took it even further and asked us to look at, next slide, what would happen if you actually applied fins to the facade and vertical fins and tried to break that surface up a little bit? It's not our preference. We're not fans of this idea. We think it actually weakens the building's presence on the site, because it's doing a couple of things that are odd. It's introducing another move, another piece of DNA to the building. It's not really serving a performance related activity, because the vertical fins really don't protect you from the problem sun, which is the low angle sun. And fundamentally, we think it's turning the building into a bit of an object that is sitting on the landscape rather than something that's focusing your attention on the landscape. Next slide. And when you look at it in comparison of sort of a ground level view up close, we felt like it's creating a kind of a coarseness to the texture of the facade that isn't helping. So we didn't like it very much. You know, I'm definitely pushing hard on this, but we want you to see that we've explored this idea with the BPDA staff, And this is kind of where we've ended up on that particular issue. However, if you go to the next slide, it doesn't have to be that aggressive. And this is kind of going more to that concept we talked about last time, where yes, we could conceivably kind of sort of rake out surface into this glass facade, and that might be a quieter move that provides a little bit of scale to the facade without undermining that core design idea. It too is not really our preference. Next slide. But we feel like it's a pretty
Charlie,
small
you've got about a minute left.
Yep, no, we're wrapping up as we speak. It's a pretty small move, but we think that if we were to stay with a simple taut facade, go to the next slide, it's about executing it well. And we know how to do that. Both Tishman Speyer, Breakthrough, and Payette have done this in Boston. We know how to specify glass well. We know how to work with our fabricators to really put together a glass facade that's not a commodity like you would see in Rosslyn, Virginia in the late 80s, but is actually a piece of true architecture. But we welcome the discussion. Sorry, I'm talking really, really fast, but try to get in under the wire there.
Thank you. Commissioners.
Maybe I'll start. And I really appreciate the presentation. I think, you know, you definitely outlined all of the comments that we discussed last time. And, you know, I think the description of the chassis and your diagram was actually, you know, a great explanation of how your building comes together. I just find it interesting that with all of the images that you showed about brick's texture and the context that this building is in, you're still committed to this glass facade on the west side. And, you know, even for performative reasons, I'm like, really? So it should be all glass? Does that really make sense? And I'm not necessarily going to challenge that. And I will just, you know, say it feels, I don't know if the horizontal move is enough to move in that direction. I don't know that it's worth it, and it feels like you've tried. And I'm just curious, you know, and I'll just pick on David just because this is a comment he had. You know, what are your thoughts, David? I'd love to have this be a conversation.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I appreciate hearing more about the thinking and that there was you know, some level of exploration. I guess for me, going back to those context panoramas, if you will, and maybe you could go back to one of those. You know, I think that the idea of, yeah, thank you. Whoops. Yeah, well, even that one is fine. Let's see. Well, actually, if you could, there was next one. There, that's fine. You know, I mean, when I look at this panorama of buildings, and you know, granted, 284A is also a fairly slick building, but there is a language of texture that exists throughout this district, including on your own building, you know, on the three sides of your own building. So whenever I look at a larger panorama like this and something is different or stands out differently, I ask myself why. You know, what is it about? Is the building a museum? Is it you know, does it occupy some special place in the city that suggests it should be so significantly different? And here I think that, you know, this is I'd be curious to almost poll the general public in the sense of, like, do they understand that this is neutral in your mind, or do they see it as actually disruptive relative to the fabric that exists around it? I interpret it as a little piece of the seaport brought in to this district, which to me is a little unwelcome in that sense. You know, the seaport has this very slick character. And I think that that's where I'm struggling. I think that, you know, perhaps the vertical system that you explored, I understand why it feels a little disruptive. I do like the horizontal grooves because I think it creates scale. I have no doubt that the quality and execution of this curtain wall will be first class. That's not my concern. My concern is really, is it neutral? And you know, if it was conceived almost as a mirror, if you will, then that would be, which I'm not sure you want to do, but if it was something that was like mirroring the park, the green, and that was the idea, it's sort of like I don't want to call it a billboard, but it's like a scrim, if you will, to that. And it was actually more explicitly performative that way, I would maybe actually buy it more. But as a kind of clear, neutral skin, it feels, I guess I don't see it quite the same way, if that makes sense. And you know, I recognize that, you know, different people are going to look at it and see it differently. I'd be curious to know what, you know, Shauna and others think too. It's just, and you know, what dialogue you've had with the BPDA, how they feel about it, but.
Well, I'll, without saying if it's positive or negative, I think probably the element that I'm least comfortable with is probably the major design idea. And I actually think discomfort is you know, okay sometimes, but the way that it feels like it's intentionally pulling away from the glass is intentionally pulling away from the masonry, the gap, the reveal between the two. Again, as I said, it's a very uncomfortable thing to look at because it really looks like you should pull this off. But as I also said, you know, that's for me a little bit of discomfort is sometimes okay. So I'll let others talk about the facade, and then I'll talk about the open space in a moment.
Well, Charles, I guess I'd be curious to know your, you know, obviously this is important to you, and so
Yeah,
and I respect that 100%.
Thank you.
I just want you to see it through eyes that may not be seeing it the way you're intending it. That's my question.
No, I think that's really really fair, David, and I appreciate the comments. I think that you're definitely hitting a sore spot when you say that it looks like we're trying to pull the seaport in when we do a glass facade, and that is the antithesis, I think, of what we're trying to do here. And we do envision this as a bit of a reflective surface that is showcasing the park, because by definition, I mean, we all see it, like even in those context photos of the glass facades, glass that has the standard low E coatings on it will be reflective. And so this glass will by definition be reflective, and so will, you know, the 284 A Street building that is right next to us. And so we feel like we're trying to be very quiet because we're not a fancy piece of sculpture like some of our neighbors, but we're actually a simple box, and we're sitting at the edge of what we hope to focus folks on, the park. And so it's true that if our glass facade is distracting you away from thinking of the park and from seeing the park, it's not doing its job. But it is intended to be less about itself as an object. And I think that it does have a different role to play when it's facing the city, and it's about a view to the city for the folks inside the building, and a kind of a skyline that doesn't end at 284 A Street, but actually needs to kind of gradually work its way into the fabric of Fort Point.
Well, I mean, I don't know what you think, but I feel I'd be curious to know. I don't know if Seth can speak to it, but I'd be curious.
Actually, David,
Yeah.
I'm here, Elizabeth.
Oh, Elizabeth, thank
So,
you.
I took over this project for Matt Martin, so I'm coming to it late, and but we've been looking at it intensely, and I think the project has looked at a lot of things we've asked them to look at really carefully. I think we did kind of force them to do this exploration against their wishes, as you've heard, but I will say, I think we also find the vertical expression on the west facade pretty convincing for the reasons you have expressed. I actually, I guess I wasn't familiar with the side of the 284 A Street building, and I'm a little bit disappointed to see that that was approved as kind of a glass facade for the same reason. So,
I think, and I mean, what's, you know, I don't know if that's being represented I mean, I was recused for that one, so I don't know what was actually approved, but it may be that I do believe that there's a frame system on that is legible, although it may not be legible in this view.
this
Um,
image, yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, the other thing that I would say, and this is just again a personal aside, I don't know what it is about blue glass in 2020, but I really do feel like the city, like I don't think blue glass is neutral anymore. It's everywhere, like everywhere, and I'm concerned about that. I think it's becoming I guess that's my issue is I personally don't find it to be neutral anymore. I find it to be almost aggressive because it's so it's so dominating new construction throughout the city. But that's again a personal opinion. Look, I think the thing for me that's sort of funny about this as we're talking about this is that I think your masonry facades are exquisite.
Yeah.
I mean, really exquisite. I think they're just beautiful, and in a way, I'm reacting to the fact that just given the choice, I like it more. So that's where I'll leave it. I don't think I want to. I think it's really up to you to sort of work that through, maybe a little bit more with Elizabeth and the staff. But I don't mind. I think there's a happy medium here, and I think that to me the issue is, can it achieve what you want, which is that neutral backdrop, but can it still somehow express the scale of the floor, of the window, of something that ties it back into everything that I see in the background here? And that would be my question to you. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in it. I think we've just worked so hard in this neighborhood and I've had very limited time, didn't get to review all of the projects. I definitely remember 244, whatever, it doesn't matter. But there's texture, there's scale, there's grid, and this is the first time we're really introducing, a flush glass wall. And so it's not that it's not beautiful or you couldn't, articulate it to be beautiful. It's just a different thing that we're introducing. And while I can understand that, it's a punch to the gut to say it reminds us of Seaport, it kind of just does, I think it's the truth. And I know you would do it more beautiful. And so it's really distracting in the context of the rest of the walls that are really nicely articulated, as David said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interestingly, it really emphasizes the horizontality instead of the verticality. So the proportion all of a sudden gets a little fat instead of the elegance of the vertical facade, the vertical masonry windows, because you read that horizontal band instead of the vertical mullions. Should I talk about the open
Yeah,
space
let's
now?
go to the open space.
Yeah.
What we think about what we do here. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ian, if you don't mind bringing up the plan. First of all, I also really I appreciate the brevity and the clarity of the presentation. It's extremely helpful. So Ian, can you bounce back and forth? The moves are subtle, so I just want to understand the moves. So you changed the tree spacing. You made it more rectilinear, and then you made a little bit less regular, which kind of picks up on the language on the other side, and then you kind of fattened you made the new connection across the street. I mean, in general, I think it's very nice. I think they're simple moves. I think they're also not the most predictable moves because when you're walking down the street, you're not going to immediately pick up the three street trees, the spacing of the trees, which I think is interesting because it's making a relationship a more something more imperceptible across the street, which I think is quite nice. And I think the language coming across the street of the paving materials is also really helpful. I think last time it didn't have that, it wasn't as obvious a connection. So I do think even with quite subtle moves, and surprisingly, just taking kind of the engineering corners off the roadway also helps that read more of a pedestrian space than a vehicular space. So I do appreciate that very small move. I also think, and I don't know if this was here previously or if we just, can you go back and forth again one more time, Ian? Yeah, so the connection, the difference along, there's no real difference along Bedford Street from the landscape perspective other than the materials, is that correct? Or the rendering?
Yeah, I mean, we've tried to standardize some of the furnishing zones to match materiality and sidewalk materials in terms of width. We've always had this kind of pushback of the lobby space with the kind of ramp and stair kind of along that northern Binford Street location. So it's more of a refinement, but not in, we feel like Binford Street, right, really wants to feel cohesive with our neighbor to the north and feel like a complete street. But I think we did really like the relief at the corner and how you interface with that. The building truss and all of that we thought was important to the plan.
Yeah, I mean and also just the opening up, understanding that you need to have service on that side. The opening up at the corner helps. So I actually think, from my perspective, I think the open space is working well. And I appreciate the changes, even though they're subtle, they're elegant.
Can we talk about the art, the proposed public art at the garage doors? Clearly you need access to, a loading area, and this Binford is definitely the right street. It is a thoroughfare, and we see this often as when people don't know what to do with the garage, they do some art component. And I don't know that it really is the right solution. And I'd encourage you to think about other solutions. It almost a series of sculptures along the sidewalk to like pull your eye away. I don't know that looking at the garage door is the answer, but some component of public art that activates the sidewalk might be a little bit more compelling than a graphic on these operable doors. I like the idea. I'm not gonna, dissuade you from doing it. I just wonder if that's the right place to focus people's attention.
Well, I also wonder, I wonder if it's, there's a sculptural quality to everything that's happening behind the columnar frame there, especially on the park, which we can circle back on when we talk about the skin again. But, and, could that, you're showing a variegated brick wall, which, is fine, but, could that feel more folded or more textured or more something and still be consistent with the rest of the design? What if it was highly vertically striated? Or you guys are brilliant, you'll do something beautiful, but I think it could be I'm a bit with Mimi on this. I would almost rather see some really beautiful texture across this than art on the garage doors. I'd rather have the art in the park. So I understand it's a long distance, but I feel like maybe that's a place where at the scale of that very, very tiny little person, something really interesting could happen. With the masonry, maybe it's, does it have to be flat? I guess that's my question.
No, I think that's a really good point, that we could definitely work some panelization, texturing of the brick, leveraging what brick does well.
Yeah. And I mean, what does it look like at night? I mean, obviously the whole building is going to be illuminated at night. You're going to see through it. This is going to right now seem like a big dark interruption to that. Is it a wall that's glazed with light, that emphasizes that texture or something? I don't know.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like it should be, I was struck by some of the public comment the last time around that really suggested to me that a lot of people would be coming this way as opposed to on the other side. And so I think it deserves a little bit more consideration.
The other thing I would suggest, I see you are creating the horizontal datum. I would explore ways to expand that on that continuity across the whole base, so that it doesn't, even if they were all the same material, that one little door is, and obviously you don't want to make a massive truck door for a vehicle, for a passenger vehicle, but I think if we're talking about brick texturization, there may be a way to really emphasize that. Possibly the whole lower part is different than the whole upper part, or that band becomes stronger.
Yeah, that's a nice point.
Didn't see the arcade today. Is that just because it didn't come up in comments the last time, but it's still there, it's still
It is still
preserved,
there,
you're still
yes.
going to develop that?
It
All
too
right,
is an
just wanted to-
opportunity for public art, but it doesn't have to be. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And we do have it in the appendix, and if you want to bring it up, we can certainly talk
No,
about
it just didn't, it's okay that it didn't come up.
Right.
I mean, I would love to, I know we're going to have some public comment, and I'd love to hear it. I feel like this project is really nice on many levels and is very, very, close. Something like this, I feel like what we were just talked about could, clearly with, working with Elizabeth and the team, and like, I feel like you could figure that out between now and when you would come back to for approval with us. I feel pain asking you to really think again about the glass wall facing the park, and maybe it's about some of the examples that you showed that reflected design excellence in curtain wall. There was a fold, or there was an expression of aperture in both of those examples, I believe. And so I'm looking for something, and I don't know what it is, but I think that it will make your project, maybe it's about how it reflects the park by making it feel intentional as opposed to like a default. That's the thing that I worry a little bit about, and I know that's not what you want. So that to me is the question, and I would in a way put it back to you and BPDA staff to try and figure out what that is. And it could be as subtle as some lines in the thing, or it could be a fold, or it could be the vertical fins. I don't know, but I feel like that's where I'm at.
Could we just put the reflecting the park to bed a little bit? I think it's only going to be reflecting for someone in an airplane, giving the angle of reflection. Conceptually, okay, but in reality.
Fair enough.
Are we ready for public comments? I think I'm good.
I'm good. I see Steve as his name.
And can you hear me and see this public comment screen?
Yes.
Great. So at this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand and staff will call on you. If you are calling in by phone, press the number 9 on your dial pad to activate the raise hand function and dial 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. And so I see Valerie. And
Okay,
sorry,
can you
Valerie,
hear me?
can you? Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'm Valerie Burns. I live at 249 A Street. Thank you for the presentation, and I appreciate the commissioner's comments that was the catalyst for the presentation. I just want to remind people that we are in South Boston in the Fort Point Channel neighborhood. It's the Fort Point Channel Landmark District, and it's a distinguished collection of late 19th and 20th century brick buildings, the largest intact commercial buildings that have largely been reused now, largely as residential and with some commercial. This building is, this project is right across the street from quite a concentrated area of residential buildings. So there's residential neighbors here. I'd like to thank the commission for what they did in looking at 244, 284 and focusing on the presence of that project on A Street and looking at the view corridor down A Street, one side pretty consistently with historic buildings. And then on the water side, there's going to be the more contemporary buildings. And the commission made a great impact in the building, the large lab building that's going to go first, right at the corner, first for related at the corner of A and Binford. I'm not seeing that kind of attention to A Street and to the sort of the public realm, the important public realm of A Street and the view corridor with this building. For some reason, it's not being discussed, and it was definitely discussed in 244, 284. So I really ask the commissioners to help us think about that. And I also want to say that Binford Street has begun to be improved. It's a very important connection. Public Street to Public Street, A Street to Binford Street to the parks. It's got to be readable, accessible. This is a 24/7 neighborhood because we live here. There are people all times of the day out, and they're using, by and large, the streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Steve.
Hello, thanks for the time. My name's Steve Hollinger, resident. Just a couple comments. I envision on the south side of this project, on the Gillette side, we'll eventually see hopefully a pedestrian corridor to the water on the Gillette side after Gillette's done with its planning, not another vehicular street. So I hope there's attention to how that side of the building on the south side interfaces with a pedestrian way to the water's edge. And I think that we planned, if I'm not mistaken, we planned a pedestrian bridge at some point over the channel from possibly at the end of that pedestrian way, which could be really potential for that. Also, with regard to the brick, having worked on the Landmarks Commission study committee, you know, I personally would like to see more contrast in the district with respect to the amplifying the existing historic architecture with contrasting materials. That said, I see that you have hand-laid brick on the lower part of the building. I'm wondering if the upper red brick, which I would have preferred to be a different color because we have red brick at 15 Necco. But anyways, I'm curious if the red brick is hand-laid brick. I know we have Tom McIntyre here, and I support him in the goal of having hand-laid brick as opposed to prefab. That would be my only comment right now. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Steve. Roy Ingracia.
Hi, yes, thank you. And I share some of the comments from the fellow citizens in terms of the design. It's, you there's a real opportunity here. It seems like this particular design has evolved. There have been concessions made in terms of the materials based on the commissioner's comments. But it still feels sort of out of place, right, within the context of the neighborhood. And those concessions have been made here and there, particularly related to some of the masonry on the first floor. And I also share the comments that seeing more of that throughout the facade would really add to the sense of place relative to Boston, and how it really communicates to the needs of the neighborhood. So as well as the glass facade, I think we all recognize how the seaport feels and the sense of that neighborhood, as well as the fact that we're in 2024 and we really need to be looking beyond that in terms of how we can build these resilient communities. So appreciate your time.
Thank you, Roy. Sorry, the name isn't coming out here fully, but is it Domingo Martin?
Yeah, you got it. Thank you. I'm not really going to add anything new to this conversation other than just supporting what's already been said about the facade feeling very much out of place, the glass facade. And I support that the hand-laid brick. I think that's nice, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the presentation. And I'm sort of in line with what all the commissioners have said. So thank you for that. And thank you again for the presentation. That's all I got.
Thank you. Shirley Venema.
I live at 249 A Street, and I regularly walk to the water along Binford Street. And I appreciate that the commissioners are asking about the quality of the street life along Binford Street. But it was interesting to me that in all the illustrations that we saw, there was no actual life of what happens along Binford Street now, that it's become really relegated to a service corridor in many respects. I think there's progress that's been made, but it still feels like I'm going to be competing with cars coming in and out of garages. Trucks are going to be parked across the sidewalks or lined up along the street waiting to get to the loading docks. I know we can't do much about Channel Side and what's happening over there, but I think we have an opportunity on the 232 side to really think a little bit more about how to tap down that kind of street life distraction to what it feels like to walk along the street itself. And to me, really having it become a welcoming entrance from A Street. It doesn't matter having a couple of signs. It has to actually feel like you're being pulled down the street. And I think we're making progress, but we hit these areas that are still definitely service corridors. And is there a way to somehow mitigate that? I guess that's my question.
Okay, thank you. Tom Reddy.
Thank you. Hi, Tom Reddy. I live at 21 Wormwood. I guess I hitchhike kind of a little bit on Valerie's comment. These buildings don't, any of these buildings don't sit in isolation. And I completely recognize the approach to try to reflect what occurs on the, if you would, the eastern side of A Street, and to some degree, the rest of the landmark district. I think we lose the opportunity unless, because back when the Related Bill 244 project was in front of landmarks, there was a number of questions raised about how do these buildings begin to set, if you would, the precedent as you progress down the channel towards the Gillette parcels. And the Gillette, obviously right now Gillette has indicated their intent to develop. So how is this building in combination with 244 going to begin to impact that transition, if you would, away from the landmark district and towards more traditional South Boston. That transition has to occur. Does it occur here at this particular point in along the channel, or does it occur further down? I just ask the commission and the proponent, for that matter, to think about that. Right, this is not just about, if you would, the northern side of the building or what's across the street, A Street, in those buildings. It also is going to hopefully influence what's going to take place in the Gillette property with the Gillette development. And yeah, so we should kind of make a decision. Does that transition begin to occur here? Does it occur gradually? Or does it occur further south, if you would, towards traditional South Boston? Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Sarah McCammond.
Yes, thank you. Sarah McCammond, 15 Channel Center Street. And just wanted to thank the commissioners for their attention to the glass facade. And I agree with what the commissioner said, and I hope that that will be altered to be more fitting in with the neighborhood. The other thing that I would mention, just if we're on the waterfront side, is the Triangle Park. Closest to the water is our closest waterfront park. And I don't believe it's being given the attention or the of what kind of a really asset it is. And currently it has, I think, what they call a loggia with benches below it, and which is a nice place out of the shade for people to sit and look at the water. And also daycare. The daycare kids all go to that little park to play and run around in. And so again, just wanting to make sure that that's fitting within the public realm for the uses that exist and for the future. And then the other thing I'll mention briefly on the Binford Street, just a small idea about the garage doors is that they could be really talking about the maritime history of the channel. And that would be encouraging people to walk on down toward the channel as well. And then I think the biggest thing that I'm still waiting to see is the rendering from A Street. So I agree with what was mentioned earlier, that we don't understand how this fits in from A Street. We've seen some renderings from Binford, which we appreciate, and definitely from the water. But it's still, in terms of fitting with the rest of the buildings that will be across the street from this site, across A Street, that's still a little bit of a mystery and to understand. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Brian Trimble.
Yeah, I just want to ask again, what is exactly planned for the upper stories? We hear about hand-laid brick on the first floor, but what are they really talking about for the materials on the upper floors?
Okay, we'll address that when we get back to the team. Tom McIntyre.
Hi, I frankly have the same, forgive me, I because it wasn't answered earlier. I was just curious what the plan is in terms of the hand-laid brick over some sort of panelization, panelized brick system. So I'd love to have that answer, and I didn't realize you were waiting to get back to the team. So thank you for a response from the developer.
Thank you, Tom. Is there any other public comment at this time? Okay, seeing none, I will turn it back to the commissioners for any further discussion or questions to the team.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a couple of just comments based on what we heard, because they were all, thoughtful comments from the neighboring, abutters. I went back and I looked at the presentation. This is probably the third time I've seen this project, and it's the first time they haven't included the A Street renderings. They have been in the past presentations, and I think we have felt comfortable with them in the past, and that's why we didn't raise it. Just wanted to make that point. It is something that we've looked at it is interesting. The brick coloration also is something that has been on my mind, but there are very many local precedents on Melcher Street, on Congress Street, of this yellow tan colored brick. They've shown precedent images. Don't necessarily agree that it's out of character with the neighborhood. So just a couple of comments in my opinion, but Charles, do you want to respond to the brick panel questions that was raised? Like, how is that made? Is it hand laid, et cetera?
So we're envisioning hand-laid brick in that kind of base zone that we were talking about along Binford Street, particularly the places where you're up against the building. But in the upper stories, we're trying to break the scale of the building down by using larger panels. And so we're probably looking at a terracotta material or something that is of the same ilk as brick, but of a, you know, a kind of a different generation, and something that most likely will be panelized. That buildings of this type these days, that is the direction the trades are headed in. And so, yeah, that is the intent at this point.
I think our intent is to incorporate hand-laid brick wherever we can. But again, that will be mostly at the base of the building. Which is, I think, also consistent with the other projects that have been approved here.
Yeah.
So David, Shauna, we have a decision to make. You know, I do think we hear consistent comments about the glass facade. And I know you hear them too.
Sure.
And I think you've done your best shot at this, but I do think a different approach needs to happen to satisfy the comments that you're consistently getting. I think the big question that we have as a commission is to decide, does that require another review, or do we have them work with Elizabeth? And, you know, I know Elizabeth will give you excellent guidance. And so I think that's a question that I'm going to pose to David and Shauna on your thoughts.
I mean, I feel a little bit like, I think what you're suggesting, I feel like some of the questions that, by the way, I really appreciate the amount of public engagement on this. Obviously, there's a lot of attention and interest in the project. I do think it would be great when you come back to explain, you know, to the full commission and so forth, the A Street strategy and its relationship to the related project and stuff like that in a little bit more detail, because I did not go back to look at the previous presentation, so I think that would be helpful. I feel that the proponent could go back and work with BPDA staff to get to a resolution for a final presentation. And if they just decided that actually would be useful to come to another subcommittee meeting, they could so request. But I feel like if Elizabeth is game, then I think that I would entrust them with getting us to the finish line here.
Happy to.
I also am of that inclination. I, you know, for the record, do prefer the vertical over the pure glass. That was my option. The pure glass of your three options is probably my third choice, as well as the others. But I'm satisfied with the idea of working with the staff to develop it. I also actually just wanted to pick up one thing on Sarah's point, that could also be something that the landscape team could be thinking about. The first I've heard of the daycare use of the park, and just thinking about that a little bit, thinking about sort of, you know, of course you'll have proper guardrails and things, but just fall protection, how you might contain kids. I think it's a really interesting opportunity and a way that, you know, could be incorporated in the park with some minor tweaks. So I would definitely pick up on that.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize the equal attention, if not more attention, to A Street than to the water. I think we've got really focused on the water side elevation because of the park, because of the glass wall. And I know, Charles, we've talked about that view down A Street, and I know you've talked about how tricky it is because it is kind of a canyon, but I do think some representation is would be helpful.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, hearing no additional comments at this time and in lieu of a formal vote, commissioners, it is my understanding that the project is recommended for final consideration and vote of recommendation. So thank you very much to the team. Appreciate it.
Excellent.
Thank you all. Very
Thanks,
helpful.
Joel.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, and our next project is 180 Western Avenue in Alston. A presentation will be given by representatives of the proponent team, including Emily Paparella, Doug Jones, and Peter Sugardes. This will be the first presentation of the proposed project to the design subcommittee following an initial presentation at the January monthly meeting. It is my, nope, it's not my understanding anymore. So I think we are all set unless any commissioners need to be recused. Okay, I will ask the proponent team to please share and take it away. Reminder that you do have 10 minutes and we will give you a 5-minute and 2-minute warning.
Okay, good evening, commissioners. My name is Emily Paparella with Elkis Manfredi Architects, and we last saw you on January 2nd, or saw most of you. And we heard feedback that included requests to show more context and longer views, elaborate on the public realm along Bertram Street, provide some clarity on the material transition between brick and metal, and generally refine the Bertram Street elevation. We're going to show you responses to each of those this evening. You all know this, but 180 Western Ave is located in Barry's Corner at the intersection of North Harvard Street and Western Avenue. It's a neighborhood square that's evolving over time. It's a common ground between Harvard to the north, the residential neighborhood to the south, and all of the new development that's happening to the west and east. There's a lot of forthcoming development. You're familiar with all of it. At 175 North Harvard Street, the Harvard ART and Harvard University Housing, Alston Lab Works, residential and commercial at the former WBZ site, as well as some residential further west, and of course the Enterprise Research Campus to the east. In the context of this development and recent development, which includes Continuum, 180 Western is consistent with the scale of Western Avenue. It's also fully in compliance with the WACRZ guidelines. The Western Avenue Corridor Study and Rezoning was undertaken in 2019. It was adopted in fall of 2022, and the project, like I said, is fully compliant. We're at 85 feet tall, 7 stories. We've got approximately 274 residential units with approximately 17% affordability. Zooming into the existing site, you can see that Barry's Corner is a neighborhood square is sort of lacking definition. The site today is primarily single-story commercial, now vacant commercial buildings and impervious surface parking lots. You can also see here the relationship of our site to the residential neighborhood to the south and this small commercial buffer, which includes the former sign store, which will be a future cafe, some surface parking, and an HBS admin building. Here are some photographs of the site as it exists today. Again, a site plan sort of lacking enclosure, but the proposed project will create edges to define Barry's Corner with the goal of creating identity and a sense of arrival. We started with the idea that the building has 2 parts. One part that addresses Western Ave and North Harvard, another part that addresses Bertram Street. On the part that addresses Western Ave is a more continuous massing, a more sweeping gesture that follows the curvature of the streets. And on Bertram, we're breaking the building into smaller, more vertically oriented volumes. This courtyard also helps to break the street wall along Bertram Street. When we look at the texture of the neighborhood, we find a very eclectic vernacular and examples of brick textures. We like brick. We think that brick is warm, it's residential, and we've also learned through many, many conversations with our task force and the neighborhood that they also prefer brick as a building material. So the palette will include brick in a variety of colors, used in a contemporary way. As a counterpart to the brick, we are introducing some metal shingle that'll create relief, but still provide texture and scale. We're proposing two color palettes, one warm pale color palette on the Western Ave North Harvard Street volumes, and a red brick palette for the Bertram Street volumes. Here we're standing on Continuum, looking down Western Ave. The building is 5 stories of brick with metal above. You asked us when we were here in January to provide more detail on the transition between these materials. So what you'll see is that we've created a more clearly defined cornice line to exaggerate what is an otherwise modest plane change between the brick and the metal. And we think that will help basically by providing a projection and a deeper shadow line. You can also see the continuous retail along Western Ave and North Harvard Street. We're using, like I said, different tones of that warm brick to subtly break up the length of the building. Coming back around to Western Ave, you can see that the Flint cleaners, as we said last time, stays in place. We don't control that parcel. And the pale brick of Western Ave wraps around the building back into the residential courtyard and is contrasted by that red brick palette that defines Bertram Street. So coming around to Bertram Street, this is what you saw when we were last here in January. And you asked us to look at better differentiating this from the Western Ave. We've also heard comments from BPDA Urban Design. We met with them last week, and as well as some comments from the neighborhood about this elevation.
And
So
Emily, you're at about 5 minutes.
okay, thank you. So we've made the following changes. First of all, we've incorporated that stronger cornice line. Second, we have raised the height of the brick so that it's uniform on all 3 of these volumes. We've differentiated the color on all 3 volumes to sort of break up the length, but also kind of exaggerate the vertical proportions here. And finally, we have eliminated the horizontal spandrel course. We've also added variety in the window sizes and layout to differentiate it from the rest of the building and also to just better reflect the vernacular character of the residential neighborhood. So some of the windows are smaller and larger to create variety. Some of the comments from the neighborhood said that it felt like an office building, so it was too regular. We added this view to look at the relationship of the open space on Bertram Street to the open space at the courtyard and how that breaks the residential or the kind of the vertical street wall on Bertram. And here's a detail, kind of a conceptual section detail at that cornice line. So we're adding the projected piece to accentuate the change in plane at that material. You also asked us to see some long views, so I'll quickly go through these views, starting from the west of the site and working southeast. Starting on Western Ave, kind of standing in front of Smith Field, you've got Continuum on the left, our project on the right, 180 Western. I'm down on Franklin Street, a kind of primary residential street that intersects North Harvard. You're looking into the South Courtyard. Closer to the site, about a half a block away to the south, looking into the South Courtyard. And then over on the east edge at Travis Street, seeing the back of Bertram Street and the edge at Travis here. You also wanted to see more context as it relates to open space. And we're surrounded by really significant green space. We think of the project as being part of a larger network, providing connectivity to existing spaces like the Grove, Smith Field, and Ray Malone Park. So I'm just going to quickly go through what we've done on the streetscapes, not only as part of Complete Streets, but also what we've done, kind of additional features to expand the public realm, add trees, add plantings, add green. On Western Ave, we're adding a cycle track, wider sidewalks, cafe zone, transparency, and retail. On North Harvard Street, we've created this interstitial band of trees, plantings, and benches. It's meant to provide, it creates a sort of promenade in this double row of trees, as well as pockets of seating that provide a place for someone who maybe isn't patronizing the retail and sitting in the cafe zone, but can come here and kind of sit in these pockets of trees and benches.
And 2 minutes.
Coming around to Bertram Street, you asked for more detail to understand the scale, just to understand Bertram Street open space a little bit better. We do have Doug Jones and LeBlanc Jones landscape architecture here, but I'm just breezing through this to get the intro. but it's about 1,500 square feet, south-facing open space. It's flanked on either side by active uses that kind of return back into this space. Looking at a section, we've got seating off of the sidewalk. We've got two planting zones that create this green enclosed room. And finally, a Boston ivy kind of climbing wall that we hope will one day create a green backdrop to this space. But you wanted to see what it looked like before it was fully grown in. So we're trying to illustrate that. There would be a brick backup wall, some kind of framework for the plantings. And we've shown this series of drawings taking out trees in the foreground to let you see back deeper into this space, the seating and the variety of plantings that we're envisioning there. Some pedestrian views of that space. And finally, these images illustrate what we envision for art opportunities on Bertram Street, art that's local and eclectic and in keeping with the spirit of Alston. You asked to see what we had in mind for some of the walls on Bertram Street where we indicated there might be public art. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners.
Emily, I'll jump in. Thank you. Great presentation and a very thorough recap of the conversation we had last time. I appreciate on the architecture side, I appreciate a lot of the modifications that you made, and I think it does feel a little bit calmer and more consistent, and in that sense, reinforces your big ideas, which is the smooth, rounded facade, and then the more elemental pieces on the other side. And I appreciate also that the change in windows that you made between the two buildings. Here's my question to you, which is, I think if there were an opportunity, and I don't know exactly the implications of this, of course, but if there were an opportunity for the windows to change slightly above the cornice line relative to the windows below the cornice line, I feel like a lot of the good work that you've done would be stronger. You know, it would further separate, visually separate the upper portions, which of course I wish were set back more. I know they probably can't be. But is there another way of beyond the line that you're striking of emphasizing that separation? And, you know, I don't know exactly, I leave that up to you, but it's just a question. And I think that if you could do that, and maybe even between the three brick facades that we're seeing here with different colors, you know, maybe there's a slight variation in the texture of the brick or the application of the brick, you know, maybe one of them is a smooth brick and one of them is a rough brick and one of them, I don't know, but that it's not just color, but that there's something more to the, and I'm really focused on this particular angle. I think the other side is a different issue. So I'm just looking for you to push the distinction between the top and the bottom and the three brick elements just a little bit more. And that's really all I have to say. And I don't know how you feel about that, but I think that it could strengthen the project's big ideas.
Yeah, David, you took the words out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was thinking. Because I mean, I can totally appreciate that you're in the same plane, and what's helping you is a different thickness of material between the brick and the upper piece. I even think that cornice, I like the simplicity and the subtleness of it, but even it might still be a little too subtle. Don't go crazy when I'm not asking, but it just feels like it might just need testing to see if maybe just a little bit more separation. But if just that you could just make those upper windows, I'm sure the units stack and there's good reason not to change the windows, but I really think that could make a big difference. It looks really
Yeah,
good. I think
yeah.
the project looks really, really strong. I don't have very much comments other than I'm curious. There's a pair of double doors in this entry piece where the vine is growing that I'm just, are
Oh,
they to the parking garage? Is there anything that we could do to, that public realm space is so attractive, but then you have these, those
Yeah.
doors right in that. I think they're in the face of the elevation, or they're off to the
they are.
side.
The doors are right here. It's actually an exit passageway that's discharging right there.
Yeah.
Yes,
the
and also
parking.
secondarily access to bike parking. So I wonder if we could think about that a little bit, just the way that they're treated and make them feel more integrated. And
Yeah, maybe it's not about hiding them. It's about if there's access to bike parking, maybe it is a little moment
yep,
to call attention to.
yeah.
I mean, I think it's quite elegant overall, although I do kind of yearn for a little bit more detail. I don't know if it's, you were talking about, you know, changing the windows. Maybe it's a slight coloration change of the mullions in the, you know, in the gray. Maybe like
Interesting idea.
the back wall where, because I actually think the back wall, I think the open space is, it's very lovely, but it's small. It's very small. You know, I'd love it to be bigger. But at least having, you know, maybe that back wall gets a lot more texture in itself, just right behind it, so that there's more detail. You can flip to the other sides, the ends in the views of the building. I'll come back to the open space in a
Oh,
second.
I'm sorry.
Trying to figure out which view.
This view?
Yeah, you know, actually the last view was good. So you know, there's the reveal in, you know, the strong reveal with the darker gray. I find the very end sort of awkward where it steps without some sort of correspondent. I would explore maybe looking at a reveal there, see if it may be a bad idea, it may be a good idea, but maybe just sort of pushing that plane back a little bit just to give. I find the end of the building pretty uncomfortable in that. And then, you know, looking at the open space, I think the open space along North Harvard is pretty nice. Can we look at that now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I because we've got space here. And I do think it's a smart idea to provide some level of seating that's sort of bracketing your green infrastructure, that also, when the tables and chairs are pulled away, you know, if we ever start getting winter consistently again, it still will provide, you know, provide a level of interest. I'm curious if it's the tree planting, if it's a different tree planting in the different bands, if it's the same tree strategy in the outer and the inner band, maybe.
I think they're probably different, but Doug could speak to that. Doug can answer that. I know it's a larger planter and a wider planter in the interstitial zone. And I believe, yeah.
They're subtly different in their width, but we could certainly, they could be the same species. There are 3 along one edge and 4 along the other, so it's a total of 7 trees. I think it would be nice if they were varied. I think, you know, one of the things we heard from the neighborhood was the desire for more green and more diversity. A lot of the development going in, you know, has a lot of paving. So we're really trying to get as much green out of, you know, as much diversity and green as we can out of these spaces.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Doug. I think having more texture, more layering, you know, colors in the fall would make a big difference. So other than I'd really love more open space for you to work with, I think it's working, and I agree that these are the doors are to the bike facility.
Yes, it's secondarily, it's an exit passageway, but you can also access the bike parking from here.
Okay, so the bike parking, the doors are accessed the other side. Why do you need a double door in that location?
We are, we're contemplating the possibility of needing to wheel out retail trash from there as well for service. So we don't have another dedicated trash for retail.
Okay, yeah, so it would be better if it was a single door, but
That,
yeah,
yeah.
going through the bike room isn't great either.
Emily, I have one more question if you're done, Shauna.
Yeah,
Are we
I'm good.
good?
Yeah.
So this back of house utilities, if we looked at the rendering, there was these large scale wall art graphics on them. Am I reading that correctly? Was that from this
Yes.
presentation?
Yes. Oops, sorry. Here.
I guess that's just a question in my mind. When I was reading that as possibly retail, but if it's truly back of house, I appreciate that you're trying to activate it. I just wonder if that scale of activation is just calls more attention to it than is needed. I wonder if it just should be smaller apertures, but with some kind of art activation. Because if it's truly for utilities and back of house, I don't know.
I think you're right, Mimi. I think it's a little bit like the conversation we had on the last project with the painted garage doors. They're it's calling almost more attention to the situation than less. And maybe this is a way to articulate that middle building differently. That instead of having the same storefront rhythm, maybe there's something else that happens at the base of this building that is a tighter series of columns or a faux arcade or something. I don't know what it is, but something that further distinguishes. I'm just going back to your original diagram of those three buildings being and I think originally your instinct to raise the brick up and down was a way to really differentiate them. And now with the more consistent cornice line, maybe some of that differentiation actually has to happen at the ground plane where you really experience it. And you really feel like you're moving past a peach brick building that has one character and a red brick building that has a different character. And then this last building, which is, storefront or something. I don't know. I think that Shauna's idea about mullion color is very interesting. That could be something to explore. I know you probably don't want to create a nightmarish window schedule, but I think that there could be something really nice there. And looking again at the stacking of the windows, and by the way, I find it to be much more of an issue on this facade than on the other one. I don't know if Mimi and Shauna agree or not, but like on this view, the windows you have the open corner window, the sort of view corner windows stacked up high. And then I think in one of the views of the other, on the other side, the windows were separated and there's more of a solid pier at that corner. And now is yeah, keep going. No, it was a view looking into that courtyard, into your.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, that one. So
Okay.
now there's there's the pier in coming up and separating those windows. It could be something as simple as maybe, again, I'm assuming that's one room behind that maybe those windows do come together there. But just on the top two floors or something like that, or the stack of twos that are going up the middle are gathered up in the center.
Right.
When I mean, you'll figure it out.
No, I like
But
that idea.
I just something to and that might have implications for the long facade where it's still very clean and repetitive, but there is something consistently different about how the windows stack on that whole second level whilst without interrupting that clean feeling.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, the windows on this one are much more horizontal than the other side.
Yeah.
Could we go back to the plan for a second? There's something I didn't understand.
Sure. Which way is the plan? I think it's this way. Sorry. Yes.
So what is at the corner of Travis and Western Avenue?
This is right here.
Yeah.
This
Oh,
is
that's
so you could see the property line of our
okay.
parcel at 180, and this is an existing dry cleaners, Flint cleaners.
Okay.
Building amenity.
Future pocket park. Okay, well, I just wanted to understand that.
Sure.
It would be a
And
nice little
I
pocket
also,
park.
commissioners, forgot to mention that just before the proponent started the presentation, Commissioner Kim joined.
Oh, McYoung.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm in agreement with all the comments that have been made, and I don't want to duplicate them. I haven't seen this project before, but there is it's a very strange site, and I want to commend you guys on trying to create like edges, because it's like between two. It's like almost like a traffic island itself. It's got a traffic island adjacent to it. And so it's got all these kind of weird roads that come together, lots of cars moving through it. So if you go to the site plan, and I think I saw in one of the drawings, like it's really at the corner of North Harvard Street, Western Ave, that it's like the site just bleeds out. It's got all this, it doesn't have like a strong pedestrian experience. And I just wonder if there's a way of really further reinforcing and screening that corner a little bit more. So that would be my only comment. I think I thought I saw bike parking in one of these corners, and I can't tell which corner it's on. Is it along this intersection, or is it along North Harvard and Bertram?
We have bike parking, exterior bike parking all along North Harvard and Western, and actually some on Bertram Street as well. We have a lot of short-term bike parking, and then this is the blue
Just
bike
great.
station. I don't know if that
Yeah.
was
I think that's what I must have seen in one of the perspectives, but I just wonder if at the corner of, because it's very nice when you have more space and you can kind of create a really green buffer as you're going towards Western Ave. But it's really this corner when you look out where it's just the view is very undefined and hard to understand a sense of place. That if you kind of moved that bike parking and made that more green and created kind of layers of buffers of green that you have in the other areas, I think it would make for kind of, I think the only solution for this site is to really create better edges. That's my read on it. And so, but I think overall there's something nice about the landscape. It's definitely nicer than what's there now. And that came out wrong. But I think it's, let me rephrase. I think it creates a diversity of different kinds of pedestrian experiences. So it would just be at that kind of northern side of this that I feel like you need a little more protection from the context and the site itself in the design. So I would encourage you to just take a look at that.
okay. That's it's been historically in our process, it's been a tough corner because of
It's a tough corner.
yeah,
I don't envy you
yes.
guys.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know how to cross the street when I come over here, and you can just see the crosswalks, right? It's like a terrible
Right.
experience, but whatever you can do at that corner to like protect yourself from the context, and I rarely say this, but in this condition, I think you could be, you guys are in some ways the first kids on the block. You've got like a gas station across the street from you. To try to be a good role model and start to create a a way in which you're engaging the street, but also defining a more pedestrian focused experience. That's what I was trying to say.
Yep.
Yeah, because right now it's a really vehicularly focused experience overall. So you're doing it over like at the corner of Bertram and North Harvard, but Bertram already has kind of this more sleepy
Yeah.
quality to it. And so just to take a look at as you're turning the corner to Western Ave, I think it would help.
Okay.
Can I ask what happens with the sidewalk on Travis Street? It looks like it disappears.
Oops.
Can you zoom in on that? Like
Yes.
where it disappears for a big stretch.
There is, I'm sorry, I'm trying to zoom in. So there will be a curb cut here where we enter this parking area. And then there's an existing curb cut here, which is outside of our property line. I think what's not clear here is kind of what happens between this curb cut and this curb cut.
Well, and also frequently with the curb cut, you would carry the sidewalk across, the sidewalk just doesn't end.
Correct.
So I think you need the sidewalk would come out where directly from your double door access at the property line. You'd extend it out and then it would also come across. Because right now it's just died.
Yeah, I feel like that might be something erroneous happening in this particular drawing, but what you're describing is the intent. It's a little bit strange here just because of where the property lines come together, but I don't know, Doug, if you have more thoughts on that, but
No, I think you're right. I think it's we'll pick it up the next time you see the plan.
Yeah.
It's the intent,
Yeah.
obviously, that the sidewalk's continuous, but there are the two curb cuts. And sort of circling back to McYoung's comments, it's a challenging corner and challenging because of the sight lines. So you can imagine, a cyclist or a pedestrian that's coming from the east, from the riverside, and keeping those people visible. And we have this added challenge of there are raised cycle tracks along Western and North Harvard, so those need to descend down to grade. So there's just a lot happening here in terms of circulation.
Yeah, no, I
and
totally get it.
trying to preserve sight lines.
But I think I guess what I'm saying is I'm not sure. I think you need more protection for pedestrians right at this corner. You just look at the spaghetti of road and how it opens up. So if there's a way in which you can move some elements to other areas of the site so that you have more room to add some vegetative edges, just as you do as you're coming down. Sorry, could you scroll out just a little bit?
oh yeah,
Or, I don't know.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
That's okay. As you come down North Harvard, you can see you've created basically a double row of trees and all these things. And just would be nice if you could find a way. You guys are creative. I think you can figure this out by like pushing everything but like green from this corner so that you just kind of create but easier said than done. I know I'm not on the ground with you guys, and
I mean, there may be
share your
some
goal.
way to take that sort of the permeable paver band right at the corner and turn that. It wouldn't be a tree because you'd be blocking sight lines, but there may be a way to incorporate green in that area, in that corner.
yeah. I'm not going to tell you means and methods, but that would be that's not our job on BCDC to design this, but we want to be respectful to you guys and just say, I just have stood on that corner because my office used to be like a block down from there and always thought, God, this is a horrible space. I just want to run across the street. And you've made a destination that's a nice place to run to, but I just worry about that. It's a small thing. I think you guys can figure it out.
Understood.
I would also see if there's another way, if there's a way to get another tree or two on Travis. I understand there's a lot going on, but that's something I think you should see if you can.
One more bite at the apple. I recognize that this building has long views, and it looks like there's no cornice, I mean, no parapet. Is that true, Emily, or is this a parapet-free building with mechanicals on top?
It would, so there will be a small parapet and the mechanicals will be, frankly, they're not, um, we expect them all to be small and collected towards the center of the roof. We will have, the larger equipment will obviously will have to have an emergency generator. It is high rise, so we're not really showing those.
Yeah,
We could,
so yeah, my comment is a simple one, which is please be mindful
okay,
of those views. And the larger elements that need to be screened, please screen them and use them to help your architecture and your architectural diagram. We've approved a couple of projects recently where we have not talked about this issue, and unfortunately, when I drive by them, all I can see are the mechanical units, and ask myself, why did that happen? So if you could just note that because I know that there's an enormous temptation to value engineer mechanical screening, and I'm just asking you to ask your client and to make sure that that's part of the package.
okay,
Especially on a view like this. I mean,
right. Right. And you probably wouldn't see them from here, but understood.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe just one last comment. I know we've been going on long. I don't want to gloss over your public art comment or idea. We didn't see how it's going to manifest in this project per se, but it is very much a character element of this area, and I really, really think that's something that we want to see. And I feel
Right.
like Shauna, there's limited public realm, but this is a big public realm piece, is to have that public art in a meaningful way activate the neighborhood. So I think that's something would be great not to see in the short term, but in the long term. Like, how is this actually being developed on the site?
Yeah, and Mimi, that reminds me, one last comment. As you're developing the details for all the planters and the benches and things like that, just remember you're in Alston. And I worry about Alston because it's, developing so quickly and there's all these glassy buildings going into place. And it's a great place and it has a lot of character and kind of a neighborhood character to it. So if the landscape itself could, as you guys are developing all these details, there's a history of a kind of grittiness, a kind of multicultural aspect to it that I'm afraid is getting lost as everyone's encroaching with their development. And I think if you can look at upcycling materials and, used to be you'd walk through Alston and, it's definitely becoming nicer, but maybe having less character. And so to think about those elements as you're developing the character of this pedestrian experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I encourage, don't be apologetic with paint on the brick. Don't always have it be an inset panel in a frame.
That's right.
Should
That's
be
right.
just, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Mhm.
Totally agree. Should we
Okay,
get
with
public
that,
comment?
Commissioner, should we open it up to public comment?
Yes.
Okay. So at this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and I will call on you. If you are calling by phone, press the number 9 on your dial pad to activate the raise hand function and dial 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. And I'm looking to see if anyone has a raised hand, and I see Paula Alexander. Please unmute yourself.
Good evening. I found your comments very interesting. I own a home on Kingsley Street, excuse me, the corner of Kingsley and North Harvard Street. So my front door is located on North Harvard, and my side door looks right over Bertram Street. And I can see all the mechanical buildings on top of Continuum, like Mr. David Hatcham noted about the mechanicals and how visible they are. Also, you know, Samuel's owned this property or leased it for a number of years, and they just sat on it empty and let it deteriorate. There was a 7-Eleven store there. There was a wonderful pizza restaurant. In addition to the cleaners, there was a 3-decker family home, and they just let the place run down. So to make them appear as if they're a savior to the neighborhood, it's, you know, they want to build, I'll call it Continuum 2 on 180 Western Ave as a moneymaker for them, an extreme moneymaker. And the rents they charge at the first building they built across this Western Ave are luxury rate. You know, I believe they're throwing in a handful of affordable here at 180 Western Ave, but the rest of the units are market rate, and according to them, market rate is luxury. So, you know, we understand the city needs housing desperately, but putting up a building of this size here with so many market rates is not really providing housing for normal people. I also had a problem with scheduling this meeting at this time because the Harvard Task Force members are also attending Harvard's Master 10-year institutional master plan at the same time. So a couple of the Harvard Task Force people asked me to read their comments. And if I could do so, it would take more than 2 minutes. So I see stop here on my screen, and I hope my time isn't up because I have.
No, I'm sorry, Paulo. Unfortunately, we do have 2 minutes, but if there is written testimony, if we receive that before the meeting, we will generally read it into the record for the meeting. But if you do have written testimony, please send it to my attention so that we can enter it into the record and distribute it to the commissioners in advance of the next meeting where, you know, at a minimum, this project will need to be seen by BCDC at least one more time, and the commissioners may decide it needs to be seen more often than that. So I do apologize for the scheduling confluence, but there are certainly more opportunities to engage on this project with this team at BCDC.
Yeah, and if I could just fit in a couple more,
Paula, I'm sorry. I hope you can appreciate that we need to be fair to other folks who would like to speak.
Yeah, if you have time at the end, I'd love to say, you know, just a couple of minutes more, if you have time. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Hickey.
Hi, my name's Dan Hickey. I live at 104 Nonantham Street in Brighton, and I am the Republican State Committee man for the 2nd Suffolk and Middlesex District. And I just wanted to get on here today because there were many of my constituents that reached out about the project, and they wanted me to express some concerns they had, which mainly focused on the height and the lack of green space being implemented into the area, and also the lack of compromise that they felt had taken place in planning the project. So thank you for the time today, and that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thomas Leonard.
Thank you. My name is Thomas Leonard. I live at 50 Aldie Street, Apartment 2 in Alston, Ward 22. I think there are 2 concerns that I have about the project. I am concerned about the lack of green space and the lack of open space. I'm also concerned about the uniform massing on both the Western Ave side of the project, North Harvard Street, and the Bertram Street side of the project. With previous developments in the neighborhood, we have seen precedent where developers will offer a step down between the main street portion of the development and the development that faces the residential neighborhood, the 2- and 3-family houses. I think there could be an opportunity for compromise here, where the massing on the Western Ave side of the project could be higher in elevation, and the massing on the Bertram Street side of the project could be lowered. A project that had followed a similar precedent to this would be 46 Leo, where on the Leo and Birmingham side of the project, the massing was higher than on the rear of the project as you went down Waverly Street. Although with that project, I think there could have been better effort made to also lower more significantly the rear of the building going down Waverly. So I would ask the development team to consider lowering the massing that is on the Bertram Street side of the project and having higher massing on the Western Ave side of the project. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Are there any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, I will turn it back to the commissioners and the development team. And
So,
if the
Seth,
team wants to put up the presentation again.
Seth, I have a question, and it may be for you, or even Emily. I understood that this project complies with the WACR-Z zoning in height, massing, etc. And really, the only reason we're reviewing it is because of the scale of the project being over 100,000 square feet. Am I misunderstanding that?
No, that's correct.
That is correct. There was actually greater height allowed in portions of the site.
Well, with that, I think the things that we talked about were details, and details that I would feel confident that could be worked on with the BPDA staff to refine. They were all refinements. We weren't talking about gross scale changes that in our conversation. So I feel comfortable having it go to, full committee.
Yeah, I do too. I support that.
I agree.
Sorry, I am fine with that too.
Okay, so hearing no additional comments at this time and in lieu of formal vote, commissioners, it is my understanding that the proposed project is recommended for final consideration and vote of recommendation, which for everybody attending, that means that it will come back to one more full monthly commission meeting, and there'll be opportunities for additional public comment at that time. Paula, to your question, if you do have additional public comment, I would ask that you please send that to the BCDC email, which I just want to make sure I get right, is bcdc@boston.gov. And if you also email that, we can address any other questions that you might have or the community has as well. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
And we will queue up the next project in 1 second. Just bear with me for 1 moment. Okay, so the next project that we have is 295 West First Street. And a presentation of the proposed project will be given by representatives of the proponent team. This will be the first presentation of the proposed project to the design subcommittee following an initial presentation at the February monthly meeting. Are there any commissioners present at this time who intend to recuse themselves from the project? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to turn it over to the project proponent. A reminder that this is to be a 10-minute presentation, and we will give you a 5-minute and 2-minute warning. So the proponent team should have been elevated to co-host, and so please feel free to share your screen. Unless there's somebody else I need to elevate.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
You can hear me.
we can.
Yes, that was Laura.
Yes, sorry. So myself, Laura Portney, Robert Leon, and Katia Paziallo are on the call, and I believe I am able to share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for allowing us to come and meet with the subcommittee. We wanted to start by talking about what we heard in our initial presentation to the full commissioner group. And we've broken this up into 2 components. So I will take you quickly through what we heard. This presentation is meant to hopefully answer a few questions that came up in the initial presentation to better explain how we got to where we are. And then we have some responses to some concerns and some questions that we heard that look to tweak the design in response to that. So just quickly, we initially heard regarding the open space and the programming of the ground floor, some questions about the scale and design of the lawn, understanding the scale in context to the community, the role of it, additionally programmatically and characteristically the intentions of what we're calling the yard, and in context also the sidewalk experience and the street wall, mostly along West 2nd Street, but additionally as you walk around the building. This led to some questions about the ground floor programming, why the lobbies were located where they were, with the main lobby being located on 1st and E as opposed to West 2nd. So this is what we focused on in regards to the open space, sidewalk experience, and programming. Additionally, we heard some questions regarding the neighborhood context, having a better understanding of the surrounding buildings and how that led to the massing materiality and language that we chose for the design of 295 West 1st. Additionally, the massing of the building, why we chose to make the moves that we did, understanding what we have as these 2 systems and how they come together. Again, looking at that continuous street law along West 2nd, and finally the materiality of the building. So just to dive into it, we'll start with the open space. I'm going to give you some big picture concepts and then turn it over to Katia to dive more into our yard. But just to, again, talk about the context, 295 West 1st, located between West 1st and West 2nd, between D and E Street, located in South Boston. We wanted to identify and highlight, and we had talked about this in our initial presentation, all of the green spaces. We have a few, these specifically, as well as others in and around Boston on the next page to give some scale comparisons. We also wanted to highlight some of the developments. There was a question about context and understanding future developments. We will talk in the architectural side of this presentation about the idea of this project being a transitional project between the residential components and the more commercial sides of South Boston. So we wanted to highlight the reserve channel development, which we all know has a PNF submitted with 8 new buildings, with a variety of different uses, heights, materiality that is under review as well. So the idea that this area is also transitioning comes into play with how we approach the design of our building. If we move to the next slide, these are the scale comparisons. So I was highlighting West 2nd Park and the community garden, as well as Flaherty Park. So you can see the outline of our proposed yard in context to some local outdoor spaces, as well as some more well-known outdoor spaces, including Statler Park, Lincoln Square, Clarendon Street Playground, and One Greenway Park. So just to better understand the size and scale of our proposed open space in context with some known open spaces within the area.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but is there any way you can make this bigger? Can you go, is this full screen on your?
Yeah, I can go as large as you'd like. What would you
Oh,
like to
no.
see?
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe it's just my computer, but it's just looking.
Okay.
It didn't go full screen on my computer. So anyway, never mind.
Okay.
Keep going. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. And we can obviously come back to whatever slide you'd like once we
Thank
get
you.
into conversation. So just to quickly go through, we also wanted to quickly talk about the programming intentions, because this will play into what Katya will talk about with the yard in regards to why we programmed the ground floor the way in which we did. So you can see we have a significant amount of community designated spaces within this building, and an intention to create partnerships with programs within the Boston government, as well as within the community itself, identifying areas that could be leased or utilized by community spaces. When we were looking at the creation of this yard, we had initially envisioned it as an outdoor community use. So we intentionally located the main lobby of this building away from this yard, with the idea that we wanted to make this open space as much of a portion of the community or belonging to the community as we could. And we felt that if we made this part of the residential main entrance into the building, it might take away from the community's ownership of the yard. That being said, later in the presentation, we have looked at, if we did not feel that these uses activated this yard in the way in which we were intending, what if we did locate the residential main entrance into the building off of this yard, making it a shared space between the residents and the community. It was always intended to be a shared space, but we wanted to ensure the priority was placed on community uses, interior and exterior, which was why the lobby and the community spaces were located as they were.
And Laura, please note that you're over halftime.
Okay, so I'm going to quickly turn it over to Katya to run through the ground floor.
Yeah, so one of the questions that came up at the first, thank you. I'm Katya Pasadla. Thank you for your time this evening, commissioners. So one of the questions that came up at the initial BCDC meeting was about community engagement and whether or not we met with the neighborhood. And very early on, we did, in fact, hold a neighborhood meeting and shared a number of precedent images such as these, and tried to get their opinions on what they'd like to see happen here. They actually didn't have any particular programming that they wanted to see happen here, but they did say specifically that they'd like to see more trees. That there's obviously very few trees in South Boston in general, and they did not want it to become a dog park. That was the main take-home message. So moving from that to the next page, please. We started to develop some concepts, and initially in the upper left, from sketchy drawings to where we are on the bottom right, we started with an assumption of the need for resiliency. Thus, we had many concepts where we had to gain the 4 feet up from 16.5 up to 20.5 on the interior. So lots of ramps and steps and things. And moving towards the right, we actually realized we can actually just do deployable floodproofing for the interior spaces, thus not needing to have quite so many ramps. And we made further revisions from there. Keeping in mind, we wanted to limit dog use in the space. I did develop the schemes initially with shrubs and tree plantings along the perimeter, around the perimeter of the park, to keep the open lawn and patio areas a little more protected from people who might be walking by with their dog. However, as we engaged with BPDA, they wanted it to feel more welcoming and more open to the street. So we opened the lawn up along its southern edge along West 2nd Street to allow for a more inviting feel. And that's, I think one of the reactions that we heard from you folks at the first meeting was, let's make sure this doesn't become a dog park. And I think that was our initial feelings as well. The BPDA really wanted us to make it feel more extroverted than introverted. So we have landed on a park design that's in the lower right hand corner. If we could go to the next page, we'll get into a few more details.
Sorry, do you mind just clarifying what's changed since last time in the park?
We have not
Since our
gotten there
initial,
yet.
Okay.
I think there's more, Shauna, coming.
Okay.
So on this page here, showing some of the hardscape materials, the variety of seating. The surfaces are composed of permeable pavers and synthetic lawn, all flush with one another for the ability for the terrace to spill out onto the synthetic lawn as an ADA accessible space, so that the terrace and the spaces adjacent to the community rooms on the interior can be flexible in their size and spill out into that synthetic lawn space. Next page, please.
Yeah, and
I'm
Katya,
trying
just to be
zoom in. I'm happy
respectful
to-
of time, I might maybe if we want to get into the details, we can after, but I do want to be able to show them our responses. So could we potentially just skip to that?
Yes, we have 2 minutes.
Okay.
Yep, so accessibility is shown here, streetscape sections shown here, a variety of programming uses shown here. We explored even more than this, and we heard, why is it jagged and angled? So we developed a curved scheme, which is very much similar in proportion regarding the lawn and the hardscape to the current scheme. So here's a curved version of that same scheme. And then on the next page, a version where we have incorporated more trees, because that's another one of the comments we heard from you is maybe, why so much lawn? Maybe the more trees is appropriate. So this is kind of bringing a kind of full circle back around to near where we were at the beginning, except that the lawn is engaging with the West 2nd Street sidewalk. So people still have this very inviting space to enter into.
Thank you. And we're just going to quickly jump back. Sorry, there's just so much to get to. So I'm going to throw it over to Robert to quickly talk about some thoughts on the ground floor programming.
Thank you, Laura. So this was looking at if we chose to activate the open space with the main building lobby instead of relying on the community use space, and looking at what we could do with that approach. So we still are showing a split lobby, but the primary lobby is located off of the open space. In doing this, we thought leaving a cafe adjacent to the open space would be good for activation as well. But then we thought that we could group the remaining community use space along West 1st Street that could potentially be used for either community use or retail as the need, as it's needed. This also shifts the main bike room over to East Street to allow the community use and retail to be more active along West 1st Street. Moving on, so we have a couple slides on material and massing. We were asked to provide a little more information about the context that the proposed building is located in. Within the blue portion is the north side of West 2nd Street between C Street and F Street. It's generally 4 to 5 stories with brick, metal panel, and fiber cement, mostly multifamily residential. Along the south side of West 2nd Street is mainly 3 to 4 story, more traditionally residential, I would say, within the South Boston context, with clapboard siding and also some brick as well. There is one 5-story brick project there as well.
And please note you're over time, so work your way through these very quickly and we can come back with specific questions.
All right. So this diagram, we had layered additional information onto it. Previously, we were talking about height, but now we wanted to talk about like this transition from the lighter blue being the lower, more residential quality, coming to our building, transitioning around the corner and becoming more commercial in its nature as it goes up toward West 1st Street. We also highlighted the bottom story, which is where we have primarily brick and storefront along that to activate the facade. The top right image also shows the massing diagram from the other corner, just so you can see how the building wraps around. We also included elevations. That was a request as well. These do have general materials that we were proposing labeled. The top is along West Second Street with the step back for the open space, setback for the open space on the right. Bottom elevation is going along East Street. And then we have the West First Street elevation at the top of this one as well. Bottom elevation is actually along the property line adjacent to 270 West Second Street. The last thing we have is these were the original perspectives that we had shown, but when we looked at the massing diagram again and thought about materiality, we thought the next slide could be a proposed change at the corner that really drives home the portion of the building that's behind the open space, really emphasizing that transition from a more residential, smaller scale character, transitioning through the open space and then around to West First Street as a more commercial character.
And that is it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners.
I'll maybe jump in to kick off. I appreciate the thinking about the lawn area, but to me, there's a disjunction between the typical use of a lawn, the desire to have a lawn, and the scale of the space. So when I'm eyeballing, can you pull up your plan, your current plan, a bigger lawn one? When I'm eyeballing this based on your dimensions, this is about like 25 feet by 60 feet, which is smaller than a small residential yard. And then I also understand now it's at the grade level of the sidewalk. Is that true, or is it sitting?
Yeah, it's flush with the interior. So if you were on the, you know, in the community rooms.
Okay, so it's
wanted
sitting
to come
up.
out onto the terrace, it's flush with that terrace adjacent to the building. And then there's 1 6-inch step from the lawn down onto the streetscape.
Yeah, so I mean, in general, it isn't flush, but it's pretty close to flush. I can't really see it being used as much more than somebody walking across it. I don't think somebody is going to want to, whether it's real lawn or synthetic lawn, at a scale that small with all this activity around it, are really going to like sit out on the lawn. And I think it's broken up into so many different pieces with the terrace, with the lawn, and maybe my fellow commissioners disagree with me, but it feels like it feels like the idea of the lawn may have been a great idea, but it doesn't quite fit the space from my perspective. And I wonder if there would be more utility to try to look at looking at the whole space between the building and the sidewalk, and trying to think of it as a vegetated green courtyard, as a combination between hard and soft space. Because right now I just don't see it being used in the way, like none of the images, I mean, maybe there'll be a yoga class in front, but I'm not so sure on a busy street on a really small lawn between the entrance to the building and a busy sidewalk that's what will really happen. So I would like to see some exploration of a different character of that space and trying to maximize the overall feeling of the feeling and utility of that space as one space, instead of a whole bunch of different broken up passages, area against the building, area against the sidewalk.
Let me think on that. I'm absorbing. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's my main comment.
I mean, sorry.
No, go ahead.
You have more? Okay. Just to pick up on that, didn't you have another option where there were like these semicircular? I feel like I looked at that.
Yes. So we had this one, but we also had this one that
keep
was more
going.
broken. Yeah.
So this one, I feel like is moving in a better direction. I do appreciate that you've made the effort and taken into consideration the comments so that the lawn is smaller, and that you've created a diversity of different kinds of spaces. So I was looking at it. I understand there must be like a seating area right outside the cafe that's hardscaped. And then you have another one by the street, by the sidewalk. And then you have the central lawn. And I think this is more promising to me than one big gesture. I would recommend kind of doing some circulation and egress diagrams because I feel like there's some that will help to kind of define some of the areas, like when you're coming in on the right side of the path. I don't know if you want to make a more generous entrance into your cafe overall. And I'm not sure about the seating area that's on the sidewalk side, or is there a connection between the two? Like, I always think, what's the story, right? Like, so I grab a sandwich at the cafe and I want to go outside. I've got a tray or a bag or something, and all the seating in this this first oval is taken. Then I have to walk all the way around and go outside. And, maybe there's a connection between that, or that this kind of plaza space gets larger and you sort of give up this seating space. It's like, I think I agree with Shauna that this is not a great place to sit outside. So maybe there's a way of simplifying this. I do like the diversity of the uses here and the way in which you start to incorporate a little bit more differentiation of planting that creates screening. So that would be my 2 cents, is that I think circulation, and then maybe doing, I think I had mentioned this before, like maybe just doing a quick programming diagram of the scale of the various spaces would be helpful to see. And then it seems like the lawn is important to you guys. I'm not sure about it myself, so maybe you can kind of come back to us and give us a better sense of how that lawn might be used, or maybe it's a little more screened from the street. So I feel like there's something here. There may be too many different things going on, but I could imagine how people might use this space in a way that I think a bigger lawn maybe too kind of monochromatic in its use.
I totally agree with that, McYoung, and I like your suggestion about maybe starting with the cafe and where you spill out and how you address that seating, because it does seem like an opportunity, I suppose. It's south facing, it's going to get some nice light. And there's nothing wrong with a beautiful paving pattern and plantings at all. In fact, it could be quite beautiful. And I do think that the size of lawn, in particular, if it goes to a synthetic material, has totally lost the quality that you're trying to gain here. That I would try to do it out of beautiful paving patterns that suggest zoning and plantings. I think that's a better direction for this plaza. But I know there's a courtyard up on the upper level, and it's probably resident only. How does that play in with this?
Yeah, maybe I could clarify a couple things or invite Rayber to describe a little bit more about the programming. I've heard all 3 of you, I think, so far comment on the use of the cafe and how that's going to inform the design in the park here, where we have a lot potentially going on in the community rooms that will spill out into the space and may need extra room and space. And the intent for the lawn was to accommodate some of those uses. I don't know if Rayber, you have something you want to add about programmatic use and how it's not just about coming out of the cafe and finding a place to eat. It's about coming out of those community rooms and having room to do things where it's not just all paved. We didn't want to do a big plaza.
Yeah. Yeah, so hi, everyone. My name is Ray Brumpenauer, and I'm helping with this project in terms of programming. And one of the things that we heard from the community and that we see frequently when we work with different nonprofits and cultural groups is that they frequently carry interior space as part of their leased premises, but they like to be able to spill out into areas in the public realm on a case-by-case basis, whether that's event specific or programming specific. So one of the concepts around the notion of the use of this lawn is to provide flex space for a lot of these community users to be able to grow into that broader palette when they need to, but of course, to be able to also function on an interior basis. And the other thing that we observed a lot in this neighborhood is this kind of persistent stoop culture, which is actually both charming and something that we really wanted to amplify with the project, where if you actually walk around South Boston, even in areas where it's not designed to be, there are these folding chairs that people have put right outside their door where there's just a tiny amount of space. And we thought, well, this is interesting because what it suggests is that the persistence of people wanting to convene in these public realm areas is actually quite strong. Even spaces that are not necessarily designed for that use, people have kind of turned them into that use. And as we began to look at different programmatic layouts that could be community functions, everyday uses, we imagined a kind of open lawn where Adirondack chairs and other kinds of furniture could be used and could be arrayed in different configurations, whether that's by the community organizations, they're part of this kind of larger plaza, or whether it's just members of the public who want to come and have, I think as Mick Young was suggesting, something at the cafe, and then they come and wander over to the lawn, to the lawn, and there's these different pockets and areas, but still maintaining enough overall flexibility that you could have a large potluck dinner there, or you could have a large, event or seasonal celebration or something of that nature.
So sorry to interrupt, but I may have misunderstood, so my apologies for that. Is this the final design then, what we're seeing on the screen, and the other iterations were earlier ideas? Or, because I feel like we saw this last time, and when I was looking at your kind of process, is the other version, the version that we were looking at with those kind of U-shaped, horse-shaped spaces, has that been kind of abandoned by the team?
No,
Oh, so
these are
this was-
this one is the latest and greatest, but it's
Okay,
not
okay, got it.
incorporated into a submission. It's up for your review and comments.
Got
I
it.
think I still prefer the one that we were looking at 2 minutes ago that is more jagged. But however, I'm totally open to this one as well. So we're
mean,
open. The other thing is there's
I
a
don't-
conversation to be had
so-
regarding the lobby location,
Yeah,
which will
I
inform
think
this
that
change.
this
too.
is a helpful discussion. If you guys did like some quick diagrams showing like where egress and all these things are. I have no skin in the game about whether it's curved or jagged. That is your purview. But I think we're all talking about the scale of spaces, the diversity of uses. And if you feel strongly that you want to have a lawn here, I'm not against that. But I think that the plan right now is a little disjointed. So I would recommend taking a look at this and trying to tell the story to the commission, like how is the space used? And I think it's still a little unclear. So I do appreciate the transformation, and I have a feeling we probably want to move towards the building.
Yeah.
Everybody's very
I-
excited about
I-
the landscapes.
I kind of think this is a little bit overwhelming to me. So much to talk about on this project. And maybe how we could just help with this project is today we just focus on the ground floor planning, because I know there's questions about where the lobby is, the ground floor, the public realm spaces, and then the courtyard space. I really feel like we're not going to be able to get to architecture at all today. But does anyone disagree with that approach?
Mimi, you know, as often is the case, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say that in order to really give this the attention it deserves, I really do think this needs to be split. So I would agree with that. And I don't know why, but I can only see the project very small on my screen. It's the only project like that. So that is also making it a little challenging. So yes, please.
Okay. So I don't know where we start, but maybe one thing that was mentioned was this community use. When you say communities, can you give us a little bit more feedback? There was talk about a nonprofit. I'm imagining these are possibly amenity spaces for the tenants, but it doesn't sound like that's at all what you have in mind.
No, Rayber can expand a little bit. I think there's going to be a search for some nonprofits to be housed here. And there's a long list of people who need spaces. Is that not right, Rayber?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, when we talk with the city and when we hear from the community is that there are a number of uses that people really need, right? Whether that's really simple, straightforward interior meeting space that can be available for nonprofits for community meetings, or whether it's other organizations that have more demanding ground floor uses, whether that's after school programming, martial arts programming, dance, visual arts, things of this nature. There are groups throughout the city that are looking for space, and of course, other groups that are being displaced. And so the community use function is really to try to bring those groups into the project and to site them in such a way that they have proximity to open space, access, all the things that, of course, would be beneficial to support their ongoing operations. But also, in the case of some of these types of uses, to act as an amenity to the neighborhood, the broader community, and building residents. So whether that's a flexible, multi-purpose room that can be used by multiple groups, or whether that is a space that, as I said, is available to community organizations that can serve multiple users. That's the work that we're engaged in with the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, and the BPDA generally, and of course we'll be doing with the community. I think what we have tried to advance is an open space that maintains flexibility so that as those programmatic elements begin to come online, the test fits for an outdoor event, maybe an annual fundraiser for one of those types of organizations, can work well both in the interior space and flex into the lawn in a way that that really, brings synthesis between those groups and the neighborhood.
I mean, so I would say if the lawn is absolutely important to the project, then I would look at ways to try to maximize its size and simplify it. So you're maximizing the utility. I think a level of protection from the street is important. I'm not sure I think when we looked at this previously last time, it was up at seat wall height. If it's being maximized, it might be better at seat wall height, but I would push out and push in so that it really is a significant lawn space if we're doing a lawn space, so that you can actually use it for something. I also would look at ways to sort of protect potentially, well, actually you have to explore this from the way that it's actually used, but to somewhat protect the edges. I'm not talking about a fence or anything, but maybe there's there's seating benches, not taking up a whole line of it, but at kind of the perimeter. So it's actually becoming a little bit of a protected space if it is a lawn, because I'm worried if it's too broken up, too complicated and too small, that it's just not going to feel like it has, and blends with the surroundings, that it's not really going to be very useful.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably the right approach if we have to have a lawn. I just find the lawn as a part of open space just really out of character for South Boston. Just extremely out of character for South Boston.
I agree.
And I'm just going to say one more thing. This idea of flexibility is not helping you. You have to commit. Is this space a space for residents to use? Or is it really a space for these nonprofits who aren't committing to you yet, a space that they need? Because I feel like this half and half it's a half-baked solution, and you got to commit.
And what would be very helpful is to hear about, we heard very clearly about locating the lobby not in a shadowed north side of the building. If we moved the lobby adjacent to this open space, it would affect, I think, some of the gestures we would make within the open space.
There was a revised plan, and I don't want to interrupt you, Mick Young, but this plan to me seemed more promising in terms of locating lobby, cafe, definitely having the community facing west first. It just seems more naturally fitting within the context of the neighborhood. You have the Foundry, you have West 2nd, block away. This is where most of the residents are going to come from, this side. They're not going to come from West First.
I mean, this is a tricky site, no question about it. So I think you can see there's no easy answer, but I think there is maybe a false equation being made between flexibility and lawn. I I think we've designed plenty. There are lots of spaces that are paved, and there are spaces that are lawn, that are flexible. And so, I mean, we live in a city where biodiversity, sustainability, all of these things, resiliency with rain gardens, every project that comes before us talks about these things as an identity maker. And so I'm not going to tell you how to solve this, but you can see that there's a struggle with this whole area. And it's really important. It's a really important corner, and it's an important offering to the community and to the folks who live here. So I would just encourage you to just take a little time and like, instead of, I think the shapes could be quite nice. It's not the shapes, it's like the allocation of space that you can probably, once you have a kind of diagram that makes sense, then I think that then all the other pieces will fall together. Maybe you've done that already, but it feels, and you could share that with us. But if you haven't, I've just personally found that it's sometimes helpful when you have this complex site with many different entries, and that you start to just say, where are all the pieces and how do they fit together? And before you start saying, this is lawn, this is trees, this is that, you just start to say, this needs to be open, this needs to be screened, and these kind of things. And that might be helpful. I have a feeling that you've done a lot of work here, so really appreciate that. That there are ideas here, and it's just kind of in the teenage phase. So if you just kind of work on it a little bit more, I have faith that as you move through this, but yeah.
I'm curious what the design team thinks of this layout. Is this a positive direction to you all, or is this something that doesn't feel comfortable?
We debated this for a while, and I think it was more of a theoretical conversation about the yard and what the community would want. And I think we agree that this does have some nice moments to it. I think it would be interesting for us to take all of your suggestions and do accessibility and circulation diagrams based on both schemes and programming based on both schemes, and see if there are themes that present themselves as stronger, so that we can more easily say that, this configuration lends to the most successful version of the yard based on what we've heard from this group. And we honestly, we looked at reconfiguring the ground floor, but we did not look at how the yard would respond to that reconfiguration. So I think that that's an exploration that we should certainly take, while also still looking at the community elements, because this does have a big impact on what the community spaces within the building could be if they're no longer associated with this outdoor element, or at least not completely adjacent to this outdoor element. So I think that there's some really good explorations that can come out of this based on the feedback that we've received tonight.
Yeah,
There's
I'll
something-
just sorry, add one word that came out in the last, I didn't bring it up, but it came about in the last discussion, which was porch. So I would also encourage you to put that concept word in your minds as you're exploring what this space is that can have the most utility for the project and for the community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. That is helpful. The element of the community space wrapping around the open space does add a really lovely layer of casualness to the community space in terms of its use, as opposed to it fronting directly onto West First. It turns it into a very like a very present element along the street corridor where there isn't much opportunity for that kind of casual exchange or that casual kind of stoop culture that we think will grow up in the context of the open space. This is in response to your question of a preference over the two schemes.
I I'd like to add one observation that I appreciated from the start, that the main entry located at the corner of E Street and West First, the top of the page, and our drop off. Look, we have a drop off loading zone out on West First Street, as well as the vehicular entry into garage is located off of West First Street. This is the busier two-way street, and it keeps all the traffic and vehicles and all that activity located on West First Street. And you won't need to take a turn onto East Street into the neighborhood in order to, go to, to and from work and whatever. It kind of keeps a lot of the activity over there, and it keeps this park quieter and more neighborhood based. And if we were to switch that around, have the main entry or lobby package delivery over on West Second, there could be some downsides having to do with vehicular circulation.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, we have had several meetings with the community. And there were certainly concerns about, what we hear very often, the Ubers, Uber, Lyft pickups, drop-offs, food deliveries. So, in our initial responses to initial community meetings, we had allocated this pickup drop-off area in an effort to try and separate that more heavily trafficked areas, Katya was saying, away from the residential. So there are certainly pros and cons to all of it.
I guess the way the neighborhood is today, and I know it's changing, it's so industrial on West First. That character is different. And I do know, it's going to be changing, but that's going to be many years away. It is not residential in character at all on this stretch of West First. And, if you were approaching by mass transit, which we hope most of these residents are coming by mass transit, they're certainly, closer on West Second to get to mass transit. And it feels a lot more residential. So I think there's a very compelling reason in my mind to go with a diagram as we're seeing on the screen right now. And I really just don't want that lobby up in the upper corner to be a main lobby, but not the main lobby everyone goes into. They go into the smaller lobby off of West Second. And I have a feeling if you switch that, that'll be what happens. But perhaps we've given enough for you to think about.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think it's probably it'd be good to have some time to absorb the comments, and I think there's some consensus here that you're hearing across the commissioners about materiality and things like that. And so we know that it's a complex process you're going through with the community and BPDA, and sometimes you get conflicting information, but our focus is on kind of creating a great sense of place. That's our focus. And so we can be really clear thinkers with you guys. And so we just invite you to kind of roll up your sleeves and clarify the intent, because I think you're, that would be the next step. And Mimi, I think it does make sense to make sure that Shauna or myself or Laura is involved in the next. I don't remember if Laura was involved in that first meeting, but I think she was.
Yeah,
right?
I think she was.
So that you won't get like one of us saying something the opposite. There'll be a consistency in the language and the discussion as we move forward.
I think that would be great. And
Yeah.
maybe we, come with some, revisions to what we talked about tonight, and then just layer in that extra courtyard, which I feel is going to contribute to answering, or help tell the story as we've discussed tonight.
The good news is I think the allocation of open space makes a lot of sense in this diagram. So I think, that's always the most difficult thing to do on a tight site like this. And so we're really now saying, let's make a great kind of entry sequence and a great landscape that truly will be utilized in an effective way.
Excellent. Thank you. No,
Thank
and
you.
this has been very, very helpful. We have a lot of good things to explore now.
I
And
guess
Mimi,
before we sign, we have to see if there's public comment.
Right.
Yes.
So
I'm
we'll
just
pass it back
wondering
to
if next steps, Mimi, is to give them a little time to look at the landscape and to kind of do the building at the next subcommittee meeting, and then, you know, hopscotch over it back to landscape.
I suppose, but I do think that the layout of the ground floor is going to inform what the building needs to be.
Yeah.
But I think we should, you know, Seth, I have total confidence that the BPDA staff assigned to this project can take our comments and really work on how they think, you know, they assemble the next iteration of this project and bring it back.
Certainly, and we'll be meeting internally and then scheduling a meeting with the project team to advance all of these themes. And with that, should we see if there's any public comment? So at this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and I'll call on you. If you're calling by phone, press the number 9 on your dial pad to activate the raise hand function and dial 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep project comments to 2 minutes. Do I see any public comment? Okay, seeing no comment at this time, and in lieu of a formal vote, commissioners, it is my understanding that the proposed project is recommended for additional review at design subcommittee with a focus at the next meeting, certainly on architecture, and then again on the open space and landscape. Okay.
Sounds right.
Thanks so much, everyone.
All right.
Thank you. Good
Appreciate
night,
it.
everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody, for your time.
Thank
As
you.
always,
Bye.
appreciate it
Thank
very
you.
much.
Bye.
Take care.